I was watching a really interesting video between Taylor Rooks and Rich Kleiman. I don't know if you saw it floating around. She had a conversation with him, and like she was basically making the argument that she doesn't feel like the media is ready to meet this moment right now with like everything that's happening and to properly give coverage to this league. And Rich told this story about Sabrina when she first came into the league, and he like went to a dinner. He brought her to like a dinner, and she also brought like some of her Liberty teammates. And, you know, someone was introducing Sabrina to like everybody. And it's like her rookie year. And it's like, oh, she's the best player ever. Like she's the best player in the world, you know, whatever. And he said like, I felt for Sabrina in that moment because she probably felt uncomfortable with that being said about her, right? Because here are her other teammates here, right? Yeah. And she's like a rookie just coming in. And Sabrina did have some of this, just not to the level of Caitlin, but we did see it with Sabrina, right? And we've seen it with the way Sabrina's been rewarded with getting shoe deals and getting, you know, covers of 2K. And it's like, again, it's not like Sabrina, especially this year, she's actually balling out. And it's not to say that she wasn't always a good player, but there are definitely players with superior resumes to to Sabrina, including on her own team, right? And she's the one being highlighted and spotlighted and featured like she's the best player and all of those kinds of things. And so it really does matter that you become informed on this league and be able to talk about it with the proper context, because, you know, you're disrespecting other players in the process. And when you do that, people start to look to the players themselves, like Sabrina, like Caitlin, to correct the record, right? And that's sort of what's been happening, because Caitlin doesn't correct the record. She doesn't address any of this. In fact, what she tells us is that she doesn't, you know, watch and see many things, right? There was another, you know, there's so many interesting videos with her that were circulating over the weekend. And we couldn't have all of them, but there was one where she basically said like, she doesn't see like things on social media. I'm paraphrasing, but she's alluded to that before in the past anyway, like saying that she doesn't see things. And it like really frustrated people, because it's like, Caitlin, first of all, that documentary came out, and we know you see things because you were on your phone throughout like that whole documentary, right? And like she said, like, you know, I hear some of it because I'm like watching TV and I see myself being talked about on TV, but you know, people started pulling up like things of her like commenting like on Instagram to be like, oh really, Caitlin, like you're not on your phone. And again, like no one can tell you what to be a spokesperson for or to speak up for, but you are seeing the conversations, Caitlin. You are seeing what's happening. You are seeing how, unfortunately, some people who are using you for whatever reason it may be to make arguments, right? Like are saying certain things. You have Congress people writing letters. You have presidential candidates or people who are at least running for president, right? Like coming out and acting like this is the biggest catastrophe, you know, that you didn't make a team. And you have never done, you know, I do like that in her comment. She said like there were lots of players that didn't make it. And, you know, I'm not the only one who had to get a call, but she really just never goes there, right? You know, Aaliyah Boston is her teammate, and there was no mention of her. And I'm not even putting that on Caitlin. I'm saying the coach didn't mention her at all. Nobody in the media asked about Aaliyah Boston, who was legitimately also under consideration for the Olympic roster. Yet no one is having an uproar that she didn't make the team, and no one is saying she was snubbed. Right? So there's an entitlement in the way people even approach this subject. It's like she was entitled to be on the team. The media, how they go about the questions, which then leads to Christy being disappointed. And it could be as simple as Christy saying, when someone asked her about Caitlin, yeah, I was pretty disappointed Caitlin and Aaliyah didn't make the squad, right? It's just that little thing, right? To acknowledge Aaliyah, that she never does. And people see it and they don't like it. And Caitlin also never acknowledges it. And so it's been a growing thing. and people are paying attention to it. And especially when you know, juxtapose that with someone like Cameron Brink, right? Who recently made a lot of comments that, you know, someone I know, Megan Armstrong, she was the person who interviewed Cameron and got all these great quotes from her. But she talked about her white privilege.
Yeah.
She spoke about the fact that, like, she wants the other players in the league to be covered, you know, accordingly. And she understands that, like, some people who go by, you know, they and them pronouns, you know. And she even talked about the fact that I know that I dress like feminine, and so that plays into it, but everyone should be represented. You know, she said it was amazing, the amount of things, you know, that she said. And yet we just never hear anything like that from Caitlin. You know, Caitlin also, she was asked about Kennedy Carter as a follow-up. And I wanna like see how she talked about this, because she was asked in her first game, you know, coming back after the long break the Fever had, you know, if Kennedy owed her an apology. And this is what she said.
I was wondering if you think, now that that foul was upgraded to a flagrant foul, if you think Kennedy Carter owes you an apology, a public apology of some sort after what happened?
You know, no. I mean, basketball's competitive. I get it. You know, sometimes your emotions get the best of you. Happened to me multiple times throughout the course of my career. People are competitive. It is what it is. You know, and she's having a tremendous season. She's played great basketball in my eyes, probably in first place for 6th Player of the Year. She's been great off the bench for them. I think she had, 25 here last night and really helped them win the game. So, no, and that's just not where my focus is. You know, that's not what I think about on a day-to-day basis. I think about my team. I think about ways that I can get better. You know, and, you know, it's just basketball at the end of the day. You know, there's no grudges. There's nothing like that. It's a sport. It's competitive. It's not going to be nice all the time. That's not what basketball is. And I think people that play that at the highest level understand that.
So look, Callie, I think this is a pretty canned response from Caitlin. Like, she says things like this all the time. I'm focused on my team. I'm focused on basketball. And we always want athletes to say that. So nothing wrong with that. I like that she said, like, look, I've had situations like this, you know, just in the heat of competition, essentially, right? I like that she acknowledged that. I would have liked if she acknowledged this days earlier when the media headlines were going crazy. And I understand that they weren't playing, so there wasn't an opportunity for her to be asked. And maybe it's not fair to ask her to say this in the immediate aftermath, but in the immediate aftermath, it was, that's not a basketball play. And in the immediate aftermath, it was her coach going on Twitter acting like some injustice has happened to her, right? And this is when you have a social media platform, right? And we've seen Angel use her platform, right? When everyone was going crazy over the Alyssa Thomas file, she came on and said, hey guys, I'm okay, right? Like, she wanted to make sure. That's a message to her fans, because people were going at Alyssa and the media. That's a message to her fans, like, I'm okay. And she did it in the press conference right away as well. She said, guys, this is what it is. It's competition, right? And so she did it right away. And so I would have liked an acknowledgement of, you know, and like what happened to Kennedy being, you know, someone coming to her hotel. That's not necessary, right? There's little ways to slip things like this in. And people will say, why does she have to do this? We don't ask people to do this in the NBA. And my simple answer to that, Callie, is this is not the NBA. This is the WNBA. And this is a league where the players speak up. That's what they do. This is what they do in that league. And so Caitlin doesn't have to do that. She doesn't have to do that. But when she doesn't, in a league with players who do things like that, it draws more attention to her, Callie.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, you know, if people wonder why people are such big fans of Cameron Brink, Paige Beckers, Asia Wilson was on a mic before. We talked about it last week, talking to Kelsey Plum and saying, look, this is what I like about Paige. You know, I'm curious. I plan to try to get some players' thoughts on what Cameron Brink said, but her just speaking out in that way so intentionally. The question that was asked to her was like something like, how do you want to, like it was to finish a sentence. It was complete a sentence. It wasn't even something that led her down that path to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately the reason why I'm so quiet with this is because like we can keep pointing out how this league operates and how the players traditionally move. And I think that Caitlin Clark, like you pointed out herself, like she sees the stuff. There's no way she's not on her phone. There's no way she's like I don't even see the point in continuing to point out the context of this. Like the reality is that Caitlin Clark is making a choice, to answer things the way that she wants to. And like I think that's completely fine, but I just don't think that we need to keep trying to give her, I guess, no, I mean, obviously we want to give her the benefit of the doubt, right? It's like, maybe she's a rookie. She's got a lot of pressure. There's so many narratives surrounding her. Maybe, she's just trying to navigate that and carefully or something like that. And it's like that can only go so far, because like you said, we have rookies like Cameron Brink who are making intentional choices to call out their privileges and, make statements in support of their teammates and things like that. And Caitlin Clark is just not doing it. So to me, it's like there's no point in continuing to point out what the other players are doing, and she's not doing it. And that's completely fine. I think that people need to just kind of learn how to accept things for what they are. I think Caitlin is not the only player who maybe doesn't, like, her views potentially might not align with what the W's views overwhelmingly are. Like you said, the W is an activist league. There are players in the league whose views don't necessarily align with some of the causes that lots of WNBA players will champion. And I'm not going to name names, but you can look at the Phoenix Mercury and see there are some conflicting views there. Here's the thing. We don't look at, unnamed player on the Phoenix Mercury to go out and
but she's not that level of player. She's not being pushed as the face of the league and the face of women's basketball, and whatever her position is. That comes with a responsibility, is all I'm saying, in any league. When you're the face of something, Patrick Mahomes got asked about his teammates' comments, right? And he tried to walk a very careful line in how he responded, but the point is, you're going to be asked.
I think my point, though, is it's what we've been talking about this whole time. Like, Caitlin Clark doesn't have to be the face of the league. That is an intentional choice for coverage and things like that. If you ask me who the face of the league, I'll tell you it's A'ja Wilson. And if you ask A'ja Wilson any of the questions, she will call out privilege, she will call out issues, she'll be very vocal. To me, she's the face of the league. I would rather talk, you know what I'm saying?
I agree with you, but what I'm saying is, you know that, I know that. But if right now, most of the media are going to continue to go with her. See, right now the questions are softball questions. And we're just having conversations around it. But she's going to start getting more targeted, direct questions. Because the noise keep doing what is getting louder. Well, she hasn't been asked a question directly, right? She hasn't been asked one of those. So she's been able to do what she's doing because the media who's going to her are not saying, what are your thoughts on this? They're just giving her it's ridiculous. Every time I see someone start to ask her a question, they're like, oh, Caitlin, congratulations on your, what are we doing? Are we journalists? Or what is this, right? And so what I'm saying is they haven't happened yet, but they're going to happen at some point. And I'm just wondering, that's fine. Your positions may not align, and maybe that's why you don't want to get into it. Maybe someone at Nike is telling you, don't speak about any of this stuff, right? Sue Bird said, she never said who, but she said she was encouraged and pushed and told not to let it be known that she was, let people think she's straight. Right. They didn't want her to be out. But what I'm saying is, at some point, you're going to be asked a direct question, and I'm just curious how she's going to respond. I just want to know what the responses are going to be.
The last thing I want to say, and this will be my last comment, but to me, it's what we are hoping Caitlin will do is going to mess up the money. You know what I'm saying? There is a fervent base of Caitlin fans who would be incensed if she were to take the same stance as a Cameron Brink, as a Paige Beckers, as a whoever, because that doesn't align with their views. They're trying to use Caitlin as, like you said, they're kind of hiding behind her to push their perspectives and stuff. So Caitlin doesn't even have to share those beliefs. It doesn't really necessarily matter at this point, since she's not saying anything, what she believes. But I think to your point, there probably are people at Nike who are like, wow, you have some very passionate fans on the conservative right. Let's not offend them. Like you just keep a tight lip, whatever. And I think that, I mean, you can look at Nike and how it operates as a company just in general. Right now, just they refuse to acknowledge any of the racial bias that went into Asia potentially having to wait for as long as she did with a shoe. Their campaign for Asia since the initial rollout of her getting a signature shoe has been essentially crickets.
Right.
I mean, she is on a historic tear. She is leading the league in blocks. Or no, sorry. Actually, she's tied leading the league in blocks per game. She's leading in points per game and rebounds per game. Third fastest player to 4,000 career points. Longest streak in WNBA history with games with 20 points or more. Like, I could go on forever. The reason why I'm doing this is because I'm trying to point out there is somehow a reason, I guess, why Nike is not pushing those things. You would think after last night's game, they would be on Twitter like, wow, they would have a graphic ready, a billboard, something, nothing.
And by the way, I saw a fan lay out a list of like 10 things that Nike could be doing for Asia right now, and they're not.
See that.
And it was an excellent list. It was an excellent list.
But I think there's a reason that they're not doing that, and that's because Asia has been used a lot in these conversations when people are talking about players who are hating on Caitlin Clark. People will say that it's Asia because Asia said that race has played a role in Caitlin Clark's success. And that was just Asia being real and answering a question that she was asked. So that's an example of what I'm saying. When you are honest and you kind of like say the real, there are consequences for that. Asia is dealing with those consequences. I don't think Caitlin Clark's people want Caitlin to have to deal with those consequences, which is why I don't expect her to speak out anytime soon. There's too much money on the table. There's a reason why Shams came out and said like, oh, now what, a day after or 2 days after the roster leak, now she's a backup. Like, there are images to protect. There is a lot of money behind Caitlin Clark, right? And there are so many people that have an interest in making sure that her image plays out in a certain way, which is why I'm not looking to Caitlin Clark to be some activist. I don't expect it, and I don't imagine
I don't expect it either. My point is not about me expecting it. My point is that the noise is getting louder. It's getting louder. It is definitely getting louder. And people who I saw giving her the benefit of the doubt before are not giving her the benefit of the doubt as much. And so eventually it's all going to come to a head. And I'm just curious how that's going to be responded to when it does. That's all. But let's end here because you said there's a lot of interest and keeping things a certain way around her. And I want to get to that, but in our next conversation, because you know what we have not been able to do? Talk about basketball, like just the basketball on the court. And I want to get into a little bit of that before we go. So, Callie, thanks for joining me. Great conversation as always. Let's get to some other stuff.